Welcome to Uruk, a city founded along the Euphrates River in modern-day Iraq in the 4th millennium BC. That's the 3000s BC, which quickly became Earth's first city. Around 3100 BC, it is believed about 40,000 people lived within its walls, and another 90,000 lived in its environs or suburbs. Uruk became the capital of the Sumerian or Mesopotamian Empire, which united several nearby settlements together. The fabled Gilgamesh was likely based on a king who ruled in Uruk and was deified after his death. Life in the Sumerian capital offered lots of different opportunities compared to the ancestral traditional economies. Stone tablets, which have survived the ages, show a standard list of professions, which included the leader of the city, cattle pen, and lambs, along with priests in the temple. Below them in the hierarchy are many specialized professions like gardeners, cooks, weavers, smiths, jewelers, potters, and brewers. Money as we know it today had not been invented yet. Instead, workers were likely paid with set amounts of grain and oil. Archaeological digs have uncovered many uniform bowls, which were probably the unit of account used to pay workers. So you can imagine being a Sumerian weaver, making whatever clothing and fabrics that are required by the city, and being paid for your day's work with enough grain and oil to feed your family, warm your small home, and perhaps trade for a few other goods or services. Most Sumerians, though, were likely independent laborers, working the fields, marshes, orchards, and hunting game outside the city. These independent laborers were probably only producing what they and their family consumed directly, without much trade. However, tablets do show an extensive trading network controlled by a merchant guild. The Sumerians imported gold from modern-day Turkey, copper from northern Iraq, lapis lazuli and tin from Afghanistan, and textiles from southern Iraq. After the Neolithic Revolution, humans became sedentary, which means they settled into camps and cities that didn't move around much. Farming also allowed people to produce a lot more food. With hunter-gatherer societies, pretty much everyone had to hunt and gather food in order to get what they needed to survive. But with agriculture, farmers could produce enough food to feed more than just themselves, freeing people up to pursue other kinds of work. Large settlements made it possible for people to specialize. Farms produced enough food that some people could devote all their time to developing specific skills like masonry or architecture or textiles and clothing or religious services. The great benefit of cities and of empires was that they could increase productivity through the division of labor, which builds expertise that can lead to innovations. It also allowed societies to produce time-consuming manufactured goods, improving transportation methods, farming equipment, and the production of art and culture. Among these ancient civilizations, none are as famous as ancient Egypt. Ordinary Egyptians lived in the most prosperous country in the ancient world, and thus probably enjoyed a sense of security and predictability that was unlike the experience of those living in Mesopotamia and elsewhere. Whereas Mesopotamians were dependent on the weather, Egyptians were dependent on the Nile, which, if it was controlled, guaranteed the harvest every year. No other ancient people were so fortunate in terms of the environment. But this meant that Egypt was an intensely conservative and traditional society, which meant that there wasn't much opportunity for bettering oneself. The vast number of Egyptians had no chance whatsoever to better their lives. Government officials enjoyed the highest social class after the pharaoh. Many officials were nobles who inherited their jobs, but some rose to power from other high-born positions. 3 key officials were the vizier, the chief treasurer, and the general of the armies. Below them were priests, who were still powerful and respected. They advised the pharaoh, oversaw religious ceremonies, took care of temple gods, and prepared bodies for the afterlife. Scribes were Egypt's official writers and record keepers and formed a sort of middle class. They were well paid and respected. They trained for many years in special schools to learn hieroglyphs, Egypt's writing symbols. Boys from several social classes could become scribes, and being educated as a scribe was only one of the few ways a person could improve their situation. The only other, really, was being a soldier. Artisans were highly skilled laborers who created beautiful objects and manufactured goods, but got little respect. Stone carvers were among the most skilled and important artisans, but they worked on state-directed projects in state-owned facilities. These artisans had little or no freedom to pursue their own interests or projects. What they produced and how they produced it were dictated by the state. Peasants were the lowest and largest social class, who mostly grew crops that supplied food, but were also conscripted to build monuments such as the pyramids. Peasants' lives revolved around the 3 seasons of the Nile River, but all land was owned by the state, and farmers were assigned to work certain plots of land or relegated to state projects. Different goods could be traded for one another, but only according to fixed prices that were set by the government. Individuals were barred from making trades outside of this system of prices, even if both parties agreed. Social status was expressly displayed and deeply embedded into daily life through clothing, jewelry, religious practices, and celebration. Today, we would recognize ancient Egypt as a command economy, or a planned economy, which is one where all economic activity is controlled by a centralized government power. A modern-day example would be North Korea, where the government decides how to use and distribute the nation's resources. They do this by directly running businesses considered essential. For ancient Egypt, this was farming, religious services, record keeping, and the work done by artisans. For North Korea, this is mostly manufacturing and food production. Because the government has such control over the economy, they also have control over people's economic lives, dictating what jobs they will work and how they will do them. While this is very different from the liberalized industrial economies we live in today, this sort of economic structure was by far the most common between the Neolithic and Industrial revolutions. Societies were rigidly structured from God down to dog, and few, if any, had much economic opportunity. And while there was technological advancement, only the select few, like pharaohs, kings, queens, and other high-born people, were able to live above the subsistence level.